Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for stopping by Crafts the Charm today. You are most welcome here. And today I want to make a Halloween craft with a very simple optical illusion. Let's go have some fun.
Let's start with making the frame because this is a fun, spooky frame that you could put any sort of image in, and it's inexpensive too. So what I used is these two frames from the Dollar Tree. One is 8 by 10 and the other is 5 by 7. And it doesn't matter what color or style of frame that you choose, but I chose these very plain or relatively plain black frames, and they each have a slightly different border style on them. What I wanted to do was embellish it with something that would make it look a little bit more spooky. And so I looked all around the Dollar Tree to see what could I buy that would give me the most bang for my buck. And what I settled on is these sort of Mardi Gras beads that are Halloween themed. So they've got little skulls in them. They're just little skulls and then little bones and also some little round beads in there. So I thought I would be able to take these beads apart and use them to embellish the frames. I'm going to take the glass out of the 8 by 10 frame and take that, of course, inside paper out, and then I will be left with just the frame and the back. And for the 5 by 7 frame, I'm going to take everything out and just use the frame itself. Later in the project, I will be using a little bit of the cardboard backing from that frame, but you don't have to use that if you want to preserve it for something else, for some other 5 by 7 frame, I guess, or if you want to reuse this frame in the future, you can use something else for that part of the project. I'm going to sort of nest the 5 by 7 frame within the 8 by 10 frame, but I don't want to use that cardboard back. You can see the hardware from the stand of the frame and the hangers sort of poking through. So I want to put something in the frame that I can then attach the 5 by 7 frame to. In the finished product, what I will do is take one of my accordion fold optical illusions and put it inside that inner frame. So I'm just sort of experimenting with that here to make sure that it's going to work and make sense. I didn't use either of the pictures that I have here because I decided in the end that they were too colorful, and I desaturated the picture some, not completely, but I made it a little bit more black and white before I created the final picture. Once I decided that it was going to work, I cut up one of my sort of Mardi Gras beads and started just experimenting with where I wanted to position those. I knew I wanted to put little skulls in the corners and probably in the middle of each side, but I wasn't sure exactly where. There are a good number of beads here, so there are really a lot of options, and when I do put this together, you'll see the configuration that I settled on. Another thing I considered was using more than one strand of beads. I'm using the black beads, but because they're shiny, I am going to spray paint this whole thing anyway. So you could use the other colors of beads and then just spray paint them if you want the same uniform color. Or I think the purple beads are really cool looking, well, so are the orange ones. So depending on your color scheme, you might like to use the purple beads, and I think the purple beads would probably go pretty well with that original picture with the full saturation. I wanted something that was sort of in a different color palette, so I didn't end up using them, even though I experimented with putting them on the top of the smaller frame. I have a piece of black foam core board here from the Dollar Tree, and again, because I'm going to spray paint this whole thing, it doesn't matter what color foam core board you use. Or you could possibly even use a piece of thick cardboard. But I used that insert from the 8 by 10 frame to cut out an insert that would fit from the foam core board. With the foam core then in place, I just started to glue my black skeleton beads to the frame. Now it's close to the outside of the frame because that inside frame needs to fit in there. So I did initially put the frame in and mark with a pencil where the edges of that frame were so that I didn't accidentally move too far into the middle with my beads. Now I did add extra hot glue around the skulls, and I don't know if it was necessary or not. I knew that it was going to show. I was very careful when I put everything on initially to make sure that the hot glue didn't show, but then I was afraid that the beads would fall off, so I did put a little extra around them, and I tried to be uniform in the way that I did that so that if it did show, it would look intentional. And it does show. I'm not thrilled with it. Maybe an option would be to use a stronger glue so that you don't have to put any around to secure the little skulls. and then I just took both frames outside and I spray painted them with a matte spray paint. I really wanted a matte look. I didn't want anything shiny here. And just a lot of light sweeps of spray paint to get them both covered. Now, once they were all dry, I took this Deco Art Metallics paint in Rich Espresso and I dry brushed it over both of the frames. So I dry brushed it so that it would pick up all of the features on the skulls and the bones and the frames themselves, and then I just dry brushed it over the middle part as well until I liked the way that it looked. Alright, now moving on to the optical illusion. This first image I got off of Wikimedia, and I'm going to put links in the description of the various images that I use. I did edit this. I turned the face a little bit, or I skewed it so that it looked like it was facing forward a little bit more, and as I mentioned before, I desaturated it. I also resized it. Now you can grab the image here if you want to do a screen grab, but I'm also going to include a link to my blog below. I created this blog so I could share things with you, and I have this version of the image on the blog. This image is the same image but with a skull superimposed over. You don't need to take this one. I'm going to explain that in a minute, but you can if you want to. And finally, this is the image that you use to make the optical illusion. So it's those first two images basically sliced together, alternating. And when you fold it, you can see at the top and the bottom there are little lines that show you where to fold the image. If you fold it accordion style on those lines, when you look at the image from one direction, you see the portrait of the young gentleman, and when you look from the other direction, you see the portrait of the young gentleman, but with the skull superimposed over his face. So here is how you then work with that image. I printed it out so that it filled up an entire 8.5 by 11 inch sheet of paper, or most of it. And that's because the size of the image is that aspect ratio. So it's basically 8.5 by 11 aspect ratio so that it can be scaled up and printed. And then I just cut off the white edges, and I used a straight edge to help me fold along each of those lines. Now I folded it first just all in the same direction. And then once I had all the folds in place, it was easy to just switch every other one so that I had it folded up accordion style. Once I had that, I removed the inner frame and I hot glued the image in the inner frame. And I did have to trim it a tiny bit. It doesn't exactly fit at 8.5 by 11, so I trimmed it at the bottom end because the top of it is pretty close to the top of his head. And then I glued that into the frame and glued that frame to the other frame. But because the number of folds that I have means that it's a little bit higher than the inside of the frame, I put some pieces of cardboard on the edges to make the frame a little bit taller. I got those pieces of cardboard from the original backing for this frame. So I just cut them and folded them up and glued them, and then glued the whole thing to the other picture frame in the center. Now, I've written a computer program to do the work of generating that initial image for you, and you can use that program if you want to. It will not be as easy as using an app on your phone, but I'm going to show you here how to use it if you want to. And that is also linked in my blog. So let's imagine first that you have a different portrait that you want to use. And this one is also from Wikimedia Commons. First of all, I've set my cropping tool to 8 inches by 5.5 inches. That way when we sort of double out the width, we'll get 8 inches by 11 inches. I'm cropping it, and I'm also setting the dots per inch to 72. That's the way it's going to work with my program. Now I've given you a link to my program, which is called Accordion Illusion, and you can run it right here if you want to. But if you want to upload your own image, you're going to click that fork, R-E-P-L, fork replit button, and then you get sort of a different screen, and you would be able to edit the program here if you wanted to. That's sort of the purpose of this software. It allows people to share code, and then they can add to the code. But you don't want to add to the code unless you're an experienced programmer, probably. Go ahead and play with it if you want to. It's a cool way to learn to program. You can always fork the original replit if you make changes that don't work. But the reason to do this is now you can upload your own files. So if you click on those 3 dots on the right in the Files section, notice you can upload a file. So I'm going to upload that new portrait that I created. And then I'm going to click the Run button. Now you have to use this the way that I'm showing you here, or it won't work. it's going to come up with a file chooser dialog box, which is those files that you see over in the left in Files. So the first image that you choose is the image of the portrait, and you say Open. And then you choose an image of a skull, and that has to be a PNG, a PNG. I've given you a skull.png here, which you can use. Then you click Open. And then you get your portrait picture, and you have to click 4 times on it. You click at the top of the face, the bottom of the face, the left of the face, and the right of the face. Now, I did write a version of this that uses a face recognition library, so you don't have to do this, but I'm not able to run that version in Replit. So it does depend on you identifying those facial features for it. So what it then does is superimposes the skull, and it's probably not going to be in exactly the right location. So you can edit this. The first thing that I'm doing here is decreasing the transparency of that skull so I have a better look at it. You can decrease the transparency of the skull by pressing plus on the keypad or G on the keyboard if you don't have a keypad. Similarly, you can make the entire image more transparent by pressing the minus on the keypad or F. Think of it as F for fade on the keyboard. You can move the skull by using the arrow keys. So you can nudge it, or if you hold them down, it will move continuously. And then you can stretch it or make it more narrow by pressing A and D. And you can make it taller or shorter by pressing S and W. Finally, once you've done that as a last step, you can click on it anywhere to increase the transparency of that location. So sort of a 20 pixel fuzzy radius around the click will have increased transparency. So the skull's not going to be a perfect fit for the face. We don't want the skull to be superimposed over the clothes. So in those locations, the hair, maybe the clothes, you might want to click to increase the transparency. The only thing is if you resize it again, make it wider or taller, then you're going to lose that pixel by pixel transparency and you'll have to start over with that part. You can always increase or decrease the overall transparency at any time. Once you are done editing and you're satisfied with the image, press the space bar and it will show you the sliced image, but it will also put it in the files over to the left, and it's called slicedimage.jpg, and it also will give you the image of the person with the skull superimposed over the face. So it saves both of those, and if you want to download those, if you hover over one of them, you'll see the 3 dots over to the right. Just click on that and you can download the image. So you can take any image that you want and you can make this optical illusion with it. You just have to follow these instructions, which I realize are pretty specific. But I did want to write this program to do this because this is the sort of thing that computer programs are good at and that I don't like to do. Not the superimposing of the skull, but the slicing it up. So I thought this would make this optical illusion easier.
So what did you think of our optical illusion portrait? It's pretty old school, but I thought it was really fun to make. I enjoyed writing the program because I knew I didn't want to do this by hand. That's what programming is for. And I also had a lot of fun making the frame. And I hope if you make this that you have fun with it too. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy this sort of content, please subscribe to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with me today. Take care.